Hiya, my name is Sheila de Courcy and I've been going to the CMC since 2005, coming over from Dublin. What I love about the CMC is the passion that I find there, the ideas, the commitment amongst people and kind of great energy. For me it's a bit like a retreat. I can go there feeling quite tired or a bit sort of disillusioned, and I always come away bursting with ideas and ways of looking at the world differently. Last year, Nadia Hussain was the keynote speaker and she gave a speech which was very, very strong. She spoke about two areas that were particularly resonant within her own life. One is anxiety and children's mental health, and the second one is the area of diversity, both in front of camera and behind camera. Nadia herself came to prominence when she won the Great British Bake Off in 2015, and she has gone on to make a career as a newspaper columnist, as a broadcaster, and as an author. She also is a mama to 3 kids who she proudly raises with her husband. She spoke with real honesty and courage about her own experience of anxiety and her concern for mental health in children, as this being an area that we must look at. And she spoke with real passion about diversity. And I think that given the way the world is just at the moment, these are two issues that we really, as programme makers, must really think about very carefully and take to heart what she says, learn from what she says, and continue to look at what we can do to address them within our schedules. So here's Nadia.
And now you're venturing into picture books with My Monster and Me.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about the origin. Why did you decide to do that?
It's one of the hardest things I've written by far, but I'd done this long before my documentary. So,
Yes.
Because what I didn't, before I'd done my Anxiety and Me documentary, I've only ever seen a doctor a couple of times about my anxiety, and what I did know about that was that I've been suffering with anxiety from a very young age, and there was no diagnosis, but I know that I'd always felt the same way for as long as I could remember, from maybe six or seven. And if I think back to myself as a 6 or 7 year old, I'm 34 years old, and even now I struggle to get help. It's taken me this long to get help. And I can only imagine there are hundreds of thousands of people who struggle to get help as adults. Now imagine our younger generation, our children, they will suffer with anxiety. And I know it exists because it happened to me. So there are loads of kids out there who do suffer, or perhaps have some form of anxiety that they don't understand. And that's why I thought, right, I'm going to write this book. And it was literally a light bulb moment where I just rang my agent and I said, I'm writing this book. And that was it. And I was just downstairs in the office at 1 o'clock in the morning just writing this book. And I said, I've written the book. And that was it. It's just, I wrote it, now let's find somebody who's going to publish it.
Tell us a bit about the storyline of the book.
It's about My Monster and Me came from what I call my anxiety. I've always called it my monster. And I think lots of people, it's about it being identifiable to people, because sometimes when you suffer with anxiety, the hardest thing is explaining that feeling, or explaining how it makes you feel, or how it manifests itself. And I used to try and describe it, and very few people knew that I had anxiety, apart from my sisters. Like, even now, my parents only recently learned that I suffered with anxiety. They didn't even know up until now. And it was a way of describing it, and I used to call it, I still call it my monster. And in the story, the monster starts off really, really big, and I always say, when it's consuming me, it's so big, it's in my face, and it's right there, and it's shouting at me, and I can't look left or right, it's always just there. And there are moments where it's just behind me and I know it's there, and it kind of taps me on the shoulder occasionally and says, hey, just reminds me that it's there. But I know it's there, and I'm struggling to get through my day, but I know that I can still do it. And there are other moments where it's like this big and I can stick it in my pocket and I can walk around. I know it's there and it's not going to bother me because I've told it, you stay quiet and you stay in there. You're not coming out today.
You're on top of it.
Yeah, and I'm on top of it. And it changes, and I think that's where the story comes from, where the monster is enormous, where it's consuming, and right at the end, the monster just gets smaller and smaller through the story, and in the end, he just picks it up and puts it in the pocket.
Why do you think there needs to be this open conversation about children and mental health and how they're feeling? Because it's clearly very important to you.
It is. It's there's no point in having, don't get me wrong, I love baking cakes, love all of that, but there's no point in having this if I'm not using it to do something good. And I think it's something that I've suffered with, and it's real, because it's real for me. It's very easy for me to come up here and say, this is what I'm passionate about and this is what we need to fix, because it is real for me, and it's something that has hindered every aspect of my life from as long as I can remember. It's always been there, and my monster's always been very big. Very rarely is it stuck in my pocket, and I've had to fight really hard to get it that small for it to fit in my pocket. So yeah, it's always been really important for me. And as much as I love baking cake, we don't talk about anxiety enough, and I know that because. I can't wait for this book to come out, but as soon as the documentary was out, I realized then that, we're grown-ups and we're not talking about anxiety. Imagine what damage we're doing to our children by not talking about it. So it's about saying, right, come on, let's talk about it. Let's be honest, because I think that's what I said. I think we could learn from our children. We could learn from the younger generation. They're so brutally honest. That's what we need to do, because kids don't want to be lied to. And I've learned that the hard way through my own children. And I try and sugarcoat things. And I remember one example, my husband, when my son lost his first tooth, he said, Daddy, should we put this under the pillow for the tooth fairy? So he sat him down, poor thing, 4 years old. And my husband said, listen, love, so in a very broad northern accent, I can't do it, I'm not very good at it. He said, listen, love, so the tooth fairy? So she's not real. And that money that the tooth fairy puts under your pillow, well, Daddy goes to work and Daddy earns that money. Here's a $5. You can have that, give me your tooth, stuck it in an envelope, and that's it. And he was like, and that was it. He was so honest. And he crushed me. My husband crushed me that day. I said, you couldn't give him the tooth fairy? I just wanted him to have the tooth fairy. He didn't give it to him. He said no, because why should he? And in that moment, I remember I really did hate my husband. I was like, how could you do that to him? Like, I like a fairy tale. Why not? Just let him have that. And he was really honest about it. And it's really weird, because my kids are brutally honest as well now. They're like, no, mom. So they're just like, they stop me in my tracks whenever I try and fabricate something. They're like, listen, we know you're lying. Tell us the truth. So they like the truth, and I think we could learn a thing or two from them.
I'd be really interested to know what conversations you have with your children about anxiety and how they're feeling, and also what they make of the book.
So a lot of the books that I've written, they've been really involved, because it's great. I think when you've got guinea pigs at home, why not use them? So when I'm doing cookery books, it's just like when I'm doing the kids' cookbooks, the cookery books, I'm like, guys, try this. What do you think of that? And again, they're honest, so that does help. So yesterday I did a chocolate cake, and they're like, Mom, that's dry. Mom, that's really dry. I was like, okay, enough. I knew it was dry. I was like, okay, fine, I get it. But they haven't actually read this book. Oh. They haven't read it. They've seen the front cover and they're very excited. So I want them to be as excited about this book as anybody else would be. And they normally would help me write a book, but I didn't let them help me, because I talk about my anxiety, but they didn't really understand my anxiety till a couple of months ago when they watched the documentary back. And now they kind of look at me sometimes, and I can see them. I can see it in their face. There's that element of pity. There's just a tiny little bit of, oh, I see it. Like sometimes they're like, oh. And I said, don't do that. It's okay, but we should talk about it. Don't feel sorry for me. If you want to ask me questions, let's talk about it. But we have lots of little rules in our house, and one thing we have is sometimes when you're feeling anxious, we don't want to talk about it, and I say, look, I'm a grown-up and I don't like talking about it, and you're kids, and I can understand sometimes you don't want to talk about things, but we have a rule in our house. It's called the top step rule. So if they're feeling really anxious or feeling sad and they can't talk about it but they want to, they sit on the top of the step and somebody will see them. Because there's always someone around. And just yesterday, my little girl just sat there. I called her my sister. That's really weird. That's how we address each other sometimes, because I didn't give her a sister. So she said, that's why I have to, we pretend to play sisters sometimes. And so she sat on the top of the stairs, and I saw her as I was coming out of the kitchen, and I said, oh, and I knew straight away she wanted to talk about something, so I went to the top of the stairs and sat with her, and she just said, oh, because I haven't been out for about 6 or 7 days, because I've been at home doing the school run, and she knows that I'll be out today, and she said, so you won't be here to tuck me in? And I said, no, I won't be. And she said, oh, okay, that's just worrying me a little bit. And that was
wow.
it. And it was just
Yeah.
something really simple, but she just needed to talk about it, and she didn't want to say it out loud. But we have our top step rule where we sit there and talk in case we're feeling anxious. But I just encourage them to talk.
And it's keeping that dialogue open, I
Yeah.
think, that makes it easier. But there are so many pressures, aren't there, for children nowadays with social media and having to fit in or be perfect. How do you feel about social media? Because sometimes I feel like, could we uninvent it? Would that benefit us? How do you feel about it, particularly with children in mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's some things we just can't take back, unfortunately. It's there now. But it's their world. And it's a double-edged sword for me, because it's not mine. It's not my world. It hasn't been, and I grew up, playing on train tracks and picking blackberries. And my kids are like, can we watch telly now? Can we go on the iPad now? It's like, no, no, no. So it's their world, and it's something that, it worries me because I've got, a teenager. He's a teenager in a couple of months. And his first question was, can I go on Instagram? I was like, oh.
It's that dreaded question, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the one I don't want to answer. I'm like, so who wants to eat ice cream? Like I avoid answering that one a lot. But he keeps asking me, can I go on Instagram? And I want to say no, but it's his world. It's the hot topic. Everyone, that's the way they communicate these days. And as long as I teach him the rights and the wrongs and the do's and the don'ts, and we don't invite everybody into our home. Equally, we don't invite everybody onto our social media. So I think, if we, with the right guidance, I can't see why they can't navigate through it. And they have to learn. They have to learn to make those mistakes. They have to learn to do the wrong thing to learn what the right thing is. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword. I don't always love it. So I have a rule in my house, 7 o'clock. I usually we have a little biscuit tin with no biscuits in. It's got all the phones, all the devices, all the stuff that goes bleep, bleep and vibrates just straight in there. It's like, just get rid. So on a weekend, we just get rid and just put it. That's why I'm not very good at doing stuff like that. I'm not good at just kind of snapping where I am and what I'm doing all the time. So I just kind of stick it all in a tin and say, and we have days where we're all watching a movie, but we're all on our phones doing stuff as well. So equally, there's, balance, and there isn't. So yeah, I love it sometimes, and I hate it just as much.
So as being a parent to your children, you're a role model for your children and other kids around the country. You're a British Bangladeshi woman who is representing on screen. Let's talk about diversity, because I couldn't have you here without not mentioning it. I read an article recently where Naomi Campbell was talking about how she feels that diversity at the moment is a trend. So we'll have a black woman on the front cover of Vogue, or there'll be a black family introduced on Coronation Street. But she says it's a trend, and actually there needs to be real change. Do you agree? How do you feel about diversity in this industry?
I remember the first time I realised that there was an issue was when I was filming Big Family Cooking Showdown, and there was probably in total in the entire studio, cameramen, sound guys, everybody included, there was probably about 60 people in one room, and I was the only coloured person, and the only time there was a second coloured person was when the runner came in, who would make a cup of tea. He'd do the teas and the runs and the rounds and cook and the tidying up. And that's the only other time there were only, of maybe 60 plus people, there were 2 of us. And that suddenly, and I remember just getting a cold sweat thinking, oh my goodness. And just realizing that there's something not quite right here. So of course it's important. Growing up, I did not see anybody like me on television, and that's why I absolutely, just for me, Ainsley Harriott was the god on television. It was just like Ainsley, like
come on, a legend.
Yeah, exactly. But he was one of very few people, and for me, watching him on anything, for me was just like, oh, I get him. I don't know. It was just being able to identify with him. So yeah, certainly diversity wasn't something that I grew up with. And, reading a book, I couldn't open up a book and read a story and say, oh, I get that story and understand where that story's from or identify with a character. None of that. So it is absolutely 100% important now. As for Naomi Campbell's comments about it being a trend, a fad, people look at mental health and call it a trend or a fad, that it's a thing that celebrities talk about now and it'll be gone. You know what? They might be right, but if we call it a trend or a fad, we're wishing it away. We're saying that it's here and it's time for it to go. And I don't believe that the little diversity that we do have, I don't think we should label it as a trend or a fad and wish it away. I think if it's here, even in its tiniest form, we should celebrate that and look to making that a bigger, better thing rather than calling it a trend or a fad. So I can't say I agree with that. Can't say I agree with that. But I think it's something that, it's happening. And if that change is happening, even if it's in the smallest amount, we should celebrate that and we should look at, and look for it to grow and become bigger and better.
What would you say you need from the industry to improve diversity? If there was one thing that could be improved, what would you say is needed?
Do you know what? I don't know that I've been in it long enough to know what it is that we need to improve it, but there's, for me to be in an industry where there isn't somebody like me. So I go to food festivals, and I turn up to these to book signings and things, and I turn up, and I'm the only person like me there, and sometimes that scares the life out of me. I just think,
Really?
It genuinely does scare me, and there are moments where I can almost feel the "you don't belong here." You don't have to always hear the words; you can see it, and sometimes I've heard the words, and it's really hard because sometimes I've ended up just kind of like walking away and just having a good cry and then coming back and saying no. And there's a rule that I have, and I tell my kids this all the time. I always say elbows out, because when I did Hajj 5 years ago, when I did the pilgrimage, there's a rule when you're in Hajj is that if you want to keep your space, you've got to keep your elbows out because it's so tightly packed. They say keep your elbows out. And so I always tell my kids, elbows out. Like if you want your space, keep your elbows out. And so whenever I turn up to a situation where I feel like I don't belong and I feel like I don't have a space for me, I always say to myself, elbows out, because I am the change.
Yeah.
We are the change. I can't change the world, but I can be the change. If I am the woman that a kid my age, the little me will have sees me now on television writing books, then I am the change that I want to see in the world. So the point is, how do I stay here? That's it. It's just about staying here and creating that space and saying, actually, elbows out, let's create that space. So I don't know how to change it. All I know is how to stay here and to create that space. And I think I think that's really important. So now, when anyone says, where do you see yourself? I say, I want to be doing this
For as long as
for as long as possible, just to create that space for more women, people of color, and anyone of that, for ethnic minority to say, you know what, I can be just like her.